wondering how I got into this mix. Mind playing tricks.
Mike, I have an interesting topic just to segue into this whole discussion. I think it's somewhat related, but I've noticed and this might be an online social media phenomenon. I'm sure some of it exists in some of the real world, but I've noticed, like, okay, we've been working together as activists and doing this show for going on a decade now. And in the very beginning, a lot of the work that we did together was raising awareness about the Federal Reserve and Ron Paul's campaign. And so you come across different people who they consider themselves Tea Party or conservative, right wing, and there was obviously common ground for some issues and things like that. But I feel like for me personally, I've always kind of realized over the years, like, all right, we can go so far with some of these types, whether right or left. But in this particular experience, they were more on the right side of the spectrum. And some of those folks,
But that always changes too, right?
yeah, it evolves. But but this is the
At
part of
that
the
time.
spectrum I want to focus on for a moment. Some of those folks at that time would consider themselves or call themselves patriots, right? And that's a word that I personally have never been, like, it wouldn't be a word I called myself. But I did have an instance where, long story short, I did this interview and somebody asked, they're like, oh, who here considers himself to be a patriot? And I realized the other people saw the term patriot as completely just like right wing and totally against it, which is somewhat what I see. But I also saw as an opportunity to say, hey, I consider myself a patriot, but not because I like the government. To me, that's not what
That's what
patriotism
I always
is, right?
understood. It wasn't about
So,
loving the government. It's about the
exactly.
people.
So, I mean, even though I'm not too comfortable and wouldn't necessarily
What
use
does
that term
it
that
mean?
often, like, that's where I would come from if I was to say, hey, I'm a patriot, not because I care about the government. In fact, it's the opposite. It's like you're willing to
Yes,
call out the government because it's, not the people confuse, and this is
It's
maybe a different point, but similar. People are confusing the government, like us, right? Oh,
with the
we did
people.
this with the people, exactly. So getting to
So in a way, I just want to say one thing. In a way, patriot does have something to do with your fellow countrymen, but it doesn't necessarily have something to do with your government, except
exactly.
to maybe keep it in line with what your country people want, what your people want.
I mean, government really is just to govern the mind, really, at the end of the day, right? So when we come down to it, though, we had people at that time who would call themselves patriots, and they were, maybe folks who followed like the Oath Keepers and with like Sheriff Mack, and they were into Ron Paul and this kind of thing. And
And
someone,
they're a tiny minority of the right, even though they're put over there.
sure. But now what I'm seeing in the Trump years is there, and especially in light of this QAnon conspiracy theory, and for anybody who's listening on YouTube or elsewhere who still believes in that, it's garbage. You're being led astray. It's disinformation. It is harmful. It may have woken up some people because people tell me, oh, but so many people are now questioning this and that. It's like, yeah, but I think it's leading you down some very, different roads. You might have pieces of the truth, but I don't think you got all of it. Because in this mindset,
Well, remember Alex Jones gave pieces of the truth.
Exactly, and now he's kind of gone even under the Trump years. We see a lot of people who are basically just following the establishment line, right? So again, I had somebody tell me on YouTube the other day, I thought you were a patriot, unsubscribe, because I did a video talking about how horrible these decisions Trump is in relating to Iran. Or anytime I call it Trump, somebody will make that sort of comment like, oh, bye, I thought this was a patriot channel. So the patriot term has, especially on YouTube, has been co-opted by these people who are definitely more right-leaning, but they're QAnon Trump supporters. And, again, I'm sure some of them are going to come across this video and they see that as being a patriot. Like they use this. You can find like Patriot Soapbox, and if you look up QAnon and Patriot, you'll find a lot of channels who have a similar theme. And so it's just interesting to me that in the past couple of years, that term has got even more convoluted and even more taken away from what it ever was supposed to mean. So I just wanted to share that, and I don't know what your thoughts are on that whole thing and what anybody online or listening to the show wants to say about that.
First they steal the word, and then they steal the meaning, George Orwell.
Yep, and I think that's a big part of the propaganda process. George Orwell, we talk about Edward Bernays and the use of propaganda, whether government propaganda, military. But yeah, part of it is just changing the meanings of everything, And in 1984, freedom wasn't even freedom meant slavery, right? It didn't have the same definition, it didn't have the same meaning, so it didn't have the same value, so it didn't affect the world in the same way.
Yeah, like when you're at the fast food restaurant, they say, hey, can I get some silverware? No, you can have some drippy old dinosaur plastic.
Oh, and they think it's silverware. And it's funny.
The word just means plasticware to them.
Yeah, exactly. They don't. There's no translation. That's just what it's become.
Yeah.
But just side note, somebody said this radio show is silverware, not plasticware. So we're doing something on
that sounds good.
But somebody online also said, I agree, QAnon looks like a PSYOP and Mossad operation.
Maybe we should talk about it for a moment.
They've been pushing for war with Iran months ago. Well, I mean, it's basically just this move that no matter what Trump does, QAnon will, or whoever is playing QAnon, and I've
Because
done
I
some
haven't fallen
videos.
into it too much. I've seen it in, passing, but I just haven't dug into it.
Well, it's just a bunch of, I mean, it's not really worth your time, but I will say anybody who wants to learn about this on the Conscious Resistance YouTube channel, I've done a few videos over the years that, well, it's been 2 years now that's been popular, but I did one looking into it, and
Now I have to
it's
look.
been long
You just told me
exposed.
not to look.
The thing, it's been long exposed, like, and I found articles as well where people involved in Trump's transition team were saying that they were involved in creating it to, quote, excite the base.
Here's a Wikipedia.
Yeah, if you go to QPost or Q.pub, like that's where these people keep up with it.
Right conspiracy
And
theories.
they basically believe, and that's the other thing, the awakening. They think they're the true awakening.
Could they be being set up to be like, look, here's all these lunatics. If you believe in a deep state, then you must be QAnon.
I do think it's a way to attack people who kind of, because the thing is, they have part of the truth. They do got a little bit, right?
Remember back
but
a
these
decade
people
ago when they had that big thing out about how to deal with conspiracy theorists and stuff?
Well, we definitely have seen. I mean, we've been covering that for years. They've been focusing more and more on that. So the QAnon, for those who are unfamiliar, it's basically just this, and
4chan.
it's a conspiracy theory which does contain nearly every other conspiracy. And I do think that there is a global conspiracy that contains a lot of other conspiracies. But in this version of events, Trump is the good guy fighting the deep state. Everything that Trump does is 4D chess that you just, unless you are part of the awakening and the movement, the Great Awakening, then you don't really know what's going on. So, for example, when Trump was bombing, let's say after Assad and the gas attack, and now we know that was a false flag, and Trump launched 40 Tomahawk missiles over there. Oh no, that was to take out deep state operations. Oh, this launching of missiles to Soleimani and Iran. No, that was because they were fighting deep state people out there. So anytime Trump is attacked by the media, whether it's for good things that we would be like, yeah, that's bad, or things are like, okay, they're focusing on some silly stuff, the QAnoners take that as believing, see, this is evidence. They're against him. They don't think very deeply. I'm just, no offense to anybody, but I've noticed that it's not a high level of thinking and researching and checking facts going on when it comes to this whole QAnon thing. And I get these people who come to my channel. I probably lost a couple thousand subscribers because a bunch of them joined when I started doing Epstein research.
It ties itself to traditional Christian tropes.
Well, there's definitely some folks who are like, just don't worry, trust. Oh, that's the other thing. Trust in the plan is a big QAnon thing. So it's this whole just trust in the plan. And he gives them these dates, or he, she, the team, they give dates, and nothing ever happens. I've been able to prove several times. Look, they do it in this sort of innocuous way.
People don't know their family. They don't talk to them. They can't work with their neighbor, but they're just going to trust.
You trust the plan. That's the whole thing, is trust the plan. And the people running it, like I said, I went back and I did the research. It was some different channels on YouTube, but there was also people involved in the Trump team, and they said they did it again to, quote, excite the base. But then it's grown and grown, and I don't know who's still holding it up, but I will tell you this: a lot of people got huge YouTube followings by talking about QAnon and following this. And these people have done, I would say, probably this movement, whoever's running it, whether it's just people taking advantage and kind of seeing an opportunity, like, oh, I'm going to get into that field. Like, people noticed, hey, when you talk about Trump, if you support him, you get a lot of supporters. And if I was to do that, we would probably, the channel would grow up even bigger. Like if we became pro-Trump here. But the thing is, these folks will just make excuses for everything. Keep trusting the plan, keep trusting the plan. And it feeds them little things like hashtag D23. Nobody really knows what that means, but they're like, oh, December 23rd. And it's like a puzzle, and they want to feel like they're a part of it. And I somewhat can connect with that as somebody who does believe in conspiracies.
Oh, it's kind of like a cult where people are led deeper and deeper into
exactly.
secrets.
And so I have folks who will come on, my different social media and say, like, Derek, you're just not getting it, man. If you would just trust these channels,
feel special, like any cult.
So I did, and Micah, I think you probably know at least one of these names. I did a video a while back called "The Problem with QAnon," David Wilcock and Benjamin Fulford.
David Wilcock.
Yeah, these names have been 10, 15 years old. You go back to David Wilcock and Benjamin Fulford. In 1999, on their blogs, they were claiming there was going to be mass arrests. That's another part of the QAnon thing, is they've been saying there's these sealed indictments that are going on. And so,
remember when they said they served them up to the old President Bush and all this stuff, and that's why he had to disappear.
Well,
they said, like,
McCain didn't die; he was assassinated. Bush didn't die; he was assassinated. Ginsburg, the reason she hasn't been seen much is because they took her out, and now there's a double. I mean, it just gets into this where they have to contort so much of reality in order to believe that Trump is still a good guy. Like, that's what it comes down to. And it's just insane, man.
Well, I think of something I learned in one of my epistemology classes now. Like, you can hold any theory, as long as you keep it squaring with reality. The problem is you've got to keep adapting it to square it with reality. So this thing you're talking about, how they have to keep making this and then that and then this and then that, it's like to just hang on to it. They're trying to make the narrative fit the appearances.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm saying, is they can put out vague sort of like statements like, oh, declassed. Like they use, if you go look at the post, it's just so silly. It looks like so minor, but they really believe that there are what they call Q proofs, that there have been times where Trump has made it clear that he's involved. And to be clear, Trump could potentially be involved in this, but that doesn't mean any of it's
He could be
real.
cute.
He could be part of, like, playing it along to lead the base along, because there's been a few times like, oh, somebody went to a Trump march and they had a QAnon sign and Trump pointed at it, and so they're, oh my God, he noticed us, he identified it, and so there's all these little things that these followers have believed that this is what they call breadcrumbs, right?
Yeah.
So think about what it's telling them: trust the plan, feeding the truth in breadcrumbs. It even said sometimes disinformation is necessary. That's what Q has told him. Like literally.
It's a cult.
If things are wrong, he can say, well, that was fake.
Think about it.
That was fake
It's a
disinfo to
cult.
throw off
Think
the deep
about it.
state.
Trust the plan.
It's just so
Breadcrumbs.
sad,
There's a
though.
little bit more.
It honestly does make me sad, because there are people who I think are good folks who are looking for the truth in the age of Trump. But unfortunately, again, I don't think that if you're going down that rabbit hole, you are, and I'm not trying to, be like, oh, we're more awake than you. But I do think at some point you got to have some standards and say, like, you don't see what you're not. I don't know. We're not even looking at the same world at this point.
The official newspaper of the Communist Party of Ukraine published an article calling QAnon a military intelligence group. All kinds of things. Roseanne Barr appeared to promote the conspiracy theory, which was subsequently covered by CNN, Washington Post, and New York Times. Roseanne
Oh yeah, I mean, there's definitely lots of people, and even on the Trump side, who have gotten involved and have, like, sort of, wink, wink, promoted QAnon, and that's what makes me think that they're very fully aware. Trump, obviously, we know he's on Twitter. He's got all these people following him. If he wasn't involved in the beginning, if his team is as smart as they are, we know they're pretty smart because they use Cambridge Analytica's data to help him become president, learning how to put people into profiles and how to respond and how to trigger them. They probably noticed, hey, if they didn't start the QAnon thing, they saw it very quickly and probably got in to some element of it. And this even goes further back. This is why it's so silly to think about this, is it did start on 4chan and 8chan, and even prior to QAnon, there was somebody called FBI Anon, which was supposedly some FBI agent, like that was, and it could be, who knows, but why in the hell would an FBI agent go to 4chan and 8chan to release these documents, or like, just... I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense, and I'm sure we've lost subscribers doing this talk because of that. And for those who might be believing this, again, I'm not just saying this without researching it, because trust me, I know how annoying it is when people discount things that they haven't researched. I'm fully with you on that. I stayed away from it for so long, but then after I heard it so much, I started to get into it, and I dove into it, and I admitted that there was a couple times where I was like, oh my God, this is kind of weird. It looks like there might be a connection. Then I dug a little deeper. Like, for example, there's a thing where Q says something at this timestamp, right? And Q has a special little code that, when they sign, that's supposed to be, that's how you know it's the same person. Of course, that's changed multiple times now, and like they've come up, oh, we had to change it to throw off the deep state. So who knows who's really signing off as Q?
But that's kind of messed up too, because you would have to be on your toes to fight the deep state, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So if by some chance there really was something like this, some of it can make sense. That's what I'm saying, is there's some elements that make you think, man, maybe there's something to this. It's very deceptive and very tricky, and I think for folks who like puzzles and like to feel like they're a part of, like solving the mystery and the ins club, it can really get you in there. So there was a statement. Q said whatever it was, I can't remember, and then 15 minutes later, Trump tweets something nearly identical, or signs it in the same way, something like that, right? Well, I went back and I did a little research, right? And at the time, Trump was in Japan. So you got to consider time zone differences, right? And I looked up, how does Twitter, because the screenshot was going around, how does Twitter make the timestamps, So, and when you looked at it, it actually was a different time zone, and that whoever was posting from, which shows specific, was after Trump, not before. But when you look at the times, it says, 3 p.m. or whatever it may be, and it appears that this came out before. But when you actually go back and you look at the timestamps and you look at how Twitter does the timestamps, and you look at where Trump was at when he tweeted, which was in Japan, which would be in the morning, it was, so I did a little digging, and there's more than a couple of those incidents where it seems like there might be this, or there was a picture from within the Air Force One, and then later on that day, Trump posted a picture, and it looked like, the identical background, or things like that they are claiming make it clear. But yeah, anybody has any thoughts on that, feel free to call in.